See?
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Let's hope this all works. We've got a
Hello, everybody.
special guest. We've got Paul. He's made an awesome course on the grease pencil.
Yes. That was it. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Yes.
That was one of the
problem.
worst introductions we've ever done. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope everyone's doing great. We're joined by Paul, who's looking lovely and is joining us at the crack of dawn in the morning at some ungodly hour. How are you feeling, Paul?
I'm okay. I'll sound better as I sit down on this coffee, and I'll probably be a little bit more human as I go along.
Nice. So Paul has joined us. He's down in Australia. And what time is it down there at the moment for you?
Oh, it's get out of my face o'clock.
Yeah. So, thank you for waking up stupidly early to come on and talk to everybody.
Yep.
Oh, no, not a problem.
We're very excited because Paul has just finished. Well, he finished it a little while back. But we're about to launch his grease pencil course, which I said in a really weird way. Paul, would you like to tell us a little bit about what grease pencil is?
Oh, could you just repeat that? Because I just got the live stream feedback.
Ooh, yeah, you got to mute the YouTube.
So I'm muting the YouTube. I'm keeping that up so that I can see the questions, and I'm distracting myself with.
This is why we have to have three people. The question is, what's grease pencil? Because as someone who uses Blender occasionally, I know it's a thing. I don't even know where to find it or why I would use it. So what's grease pencil?
Okay, so grease pencil is basically a way of drawing 2D stuff in a 3D environment. It sort of started off as life as the annotation tool, if you remember that, several versions ago. So like when that first began, it's like you could just scribble all over your screen. But then they thought, oh, you know what? There's probably something to this. Let's put a tool set behind it. And now, let's see. I think it was out with the around about the 2.8 version mark. It became its own dedicated tool. Long story short, you just use the grease pencil to do 2D sort of stuff. Illustration, animation, that sort of thing.
Right.
So instead of trying to sort of toon render or anything like that, you simply just sketch. And the best way I could describe it is if you've ever used Illustrator or a vector tool, it draws much in the same way.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to have one more question because this is one that's going to come up a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why would you use grease pencil? Like, what's the advantage of grease pencil over something like Inkscape or Illustrator?
Okay, so traditionally, if you wanted to get 2D animation into a sort of even a faux 3D environment, which I've done in the past with things like After Effects, yeah, you do it in Inkscape or whatever your 2D tool is. Then you'd have to import those assets into something like a compositor, like After Effects, and then you would have to plot it out in 3D space so you could get some 3D effects. The advantage in doing it all in Blender is that you're already working in a 3D space. And as you know, 3D is becoming a lot more prevalent, even in 2D work, to get certain effects. I mean, even just to something as simple as a depth of field effect. Yeah, you've got some very sophisticated plugins in 2D programs, but if you've got a 3D environment, you can basically use that to your advantage. Even just like anything with a camera setting, just getting your zoom lens right and all that sort of stuff. And the 2D can sort of like function in that environment already. I found that to be the most advantageous part of working with grease pencil. Plus, it's a heck of a lot of fun to use.
It is pretty fun to use, I have to say. Mikey, I keep stepping over you. So what did you have to say? Come on.
I was going to say, one of the great things about having the grease pencil tool, what I did not realize it had grown to such an ability as how it had. I started playing it back in the very early days of Blender 2.8, and you could do things like create basically 3D sketches. You could convert the sketch lines that you'd done into geometry as well, which was so refreshing. You could really just sketch some quick grass or little things like that, or cables across the floor. So it was really, really powerful then, and it's just gone through the roof in terms of its abilities, in terms of actually using it as a There's an animation tool now as well. They've got what's called onion skinning, where you can see the frames behind and in front, so you can accurately draw, proper 2D animation at that point. But you've got all the benefits of it being in the 3D world. You've got all the benefits of being able to edit stuff as well very, very easily. You literally just grab a point, much like a Bezier curve, and you can move it about to your heart's content.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love it. So I think, without any further ado, I'm going to post the link to the course. I'm going to run the promo.
Well, before you post the link to the course, do you want me to publish it?
No. Yeah, you should probably do that.
Ta-da! Okay, now you can post the link to the course.
Nice.
We know what we're doing.
Do you need a drum roll?
Check it works.
Do an egg roll right now.
An egg roll. Right, hopefully this link works, and I will play for you the promotional video for it.
Hey everybody, Paul here with some very exciting news. I have just released a new course all about illustrating using the grease pencil in Blender. The grease pencil is a powerful tool which allows you to illustrate and animate 2D artwork directly inside of the Blender interface. If you've illustrated in traditional applications such as Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint, or even if you've never picked up a pencil before and wanted to start with digital illustration, this course will teach you everything you need to know to get you up and running with the grease pencil in next to no time. My name is Paul and I will be your instructor throughout this course. We'll cover everything from navigating the interface, learning about brushes, layers, materials, and more. In just a few hours, you'll learn simple and powerful methods of creating, manipulating, and polishing stunning content, taking full advantage of working in a 3D environment. After mastering the basics, I'll take you through a short series of fun projects. You'll learn how to create your own custom texture brush and set up this simple underwater background. When you're ready to try something more challenging, I'll take you through the steps of illustrating this gorgeous mermaid. You'll put your newly acquired skills to use and learn some of the basics of illustration along the way. Once completed, I'll show you how to put all the elements together, add some effects, and even leverage the compositor to render out a polished illustration. It really is amazing to see what you can achieve using Blender's grease pencil. All of the working files are included, so if you get stuck or just want to focus on a specific area of the project, you'll be able to pick things up from any lesson. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you'll be making using Blender's grease pencil. Thanks to Michael Bridges for bringing me on board to create this course for Canopy Games. If you're interested in signing up, finding out how much the course is, all the relevant links are in the notes below this video. And so I hope to see you there. Bye for now.
Okay, everybody.
Oh, we're back.
What did you think to that? I mean, whilst it was running, we were having a little chat in the background about custom brushes. If you saw midway through, there was a bubble created and a grass created as well. And just I know these things are available, and they're available in things like Procreate, which is a dedicated 2D drawing tool. You just forget this functionality's been added to Blender as well.
It's kind of amazing because whenever I think of Blender, I think it's a 3D modeling tool. But that's a very small part of what it can do these days. Like it's a 2D animation tool, it's a film editing tool. Like it's an impressive suite.
Yeah, it's definitely a suite of programs. Definitely.
It is pretty sweet.
Ba-dum.
Don't encourage that. But yeah, it's looking fantastic, and we're now launched, so you guys can go give us lots of money. I mean, you guys can go learn the course and enjoy fantastic things. But if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, interpretive dances, and jingles, post them in the chat.
Yeah,
We'll get to them.
We will be around today. Paul does have to nip off and do his normal day routine at some point today, so we've got him for basically on the hour, and then we've got to let him go and do fatherly things and all the rest of the day. So we've got to get those questions in nice and soon.
I'm going to start with one. What got you started with Grease Pencil?
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's a very, it's like, yeah. Sorry, no, I'm looking at the chat, just making sure that there's no questions to answer just yet, but which is great. But it's great to see all these people here. So hi everyone. Oh boy, when did I get started with? Probably when I heard that it was announced for the 2.8 series. I think the Blender 2.8 was in beta. Yep. I think it was around 2018. I've got vivid memories of going to this conference and giving a talk on using Blender for comics, that sort of thing. And I decided to do a bit of Inktober stuff, and I thought, you know what, this would be a perfect idea to run it through its paces. So, if anyone's not aware of Inktober, that's just a thing where for every day of October, you get a prompt sheet, which circulates widely across the net. You can pretty much get it from anywhere. And based on the word of the day, you do a quick drawing. And I thought, I'll do this in Grease Pencil just to test it out. And there I was at the Blender conference, and that was sort of like towards the tail end of October. And Danny Larry, who's one of the developers, he sort of saw me using it, and we just got into a really good conversation about, how do I find it? Is there anything that I, even back then, it was like, is there anything you want to improve? I'm like, dude, this just came out. It's blowing my mind. I can't really go to the improvement step just yet. And that's sort of where I started using it as soon as it was pretty much out. And as it went on, I mean, I got really used to it. And I really like its tool set. I like a lot of the functionality that it brings. I found illustrating in it, like when I compare it to things like Illustrator and vector style drawing programs, I always had difficulty transitioning from, say, a Photoshop or raster based drawing application to a vector based one. The difference mainly is with a raster based one, you just grab a brush, start painting. With vector, you do that, but then you can go into an edit mode where you can grab a Bezier handle at any point and further adjust your line work. Plus, you can zoom in and out, and it's resolution independent. So, you can get crisp lines when you go close up or zoom out, whatever. And Grease Pencil works very much in that way, as it should in a 3D environment when you know that you might be placing your camera somewhere else, and you don't want your raster lines to suddenly look blurry all of a sudden. That's where something like a vector would come in handy. And so, I very quickly got used to that. And I've got to say, the latest improvements, things like bringing on vertex painting, which if you've done any in 3D modeling or material creation, you already know how that works. This is just a way of bringing in things like custom palettes, which you're probably more used to in a 2D program, into the interface for Grease Pencil. So, you create yourself a material, you draw yourself a picture, and then you even have this thing called a tint brush where you can select from a palette and just go, I don't really like that yellow. I'm going to paint it green. And it's like spray painting it, and you just change the color on the fly. And it's just absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, from a game making point of view, the I guess organic way you can make characters and sprites really appeals to me. In a lot of different ways. Like you can use the onion scaling to just make a really clean sprite sheet so that the movement of a character is very, very precise. Or if you want to, you can make a cutout style animation game, give it a lot of character that way. Noel says, Paul is the best. Great work, mad respect. I think I'm probably third best on the stream, but yep.
for those who are interested in learning more about Paul and seeing some of his other work, I will just post a link to his YouTube channel there as well. So do check that out.
Yep. Oh,
Give
I
him
have
a
to press this button.
subscribe and a couple of likes and all that lot.
I missed that one.
But yeah, I mean that's how I discovered Paul. And we started getting talking. We're part of a group called Blender Nest. That's another YouTube channel. I won't spam with YouTube channels just at the moment. I'll drop that in later. This is a group of Blender people from all backgrounds who get together weekly. We chat about stuff, do art reviews now. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Check it out. So yeah, with the course itself, it's going to be on offer for the first week, and then it'll go up to $10. So it's on at sale at the moment at $7. So check it out.
You also have a couple of other options. If you want to, you can get the Blender Creative Suite, which is the bundle of this and the current and upcoming courses as well.
Yeah.
Or if you really want to, you can become a lifetime member, and then you get access to everybody. But that's like if you have the cash to spend on that. I don't just do that randomly. But if you're interested at all in making good 2D art, I really do recommend the Grease Pencil course. Like it's very different from anything else we've got so far. Like it's a much more creative flow from what we're doing as opposed to like the mechanics of how to make the shapes in Blender or how to make a character move in Godot.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the great things about learning a different tool in Blender is it really does open up the avenues for being more creative. One of the things that Grease Pencil can open up for you is a bit more concept art without having to hop out into another program. It's especially great if you've got a graphics tablet. The first part of the course is designed in such a way that you do not need one. However, it's the type of art. If you're serious about your artwork, you're going to get yourself. I'm not going to pick up the tablet itself, but you're going to pick up, one of these funky pens and a little square slate in front of you. You can get them really, really inexpensively these days as well. They used to cost, well,
they were hundreds.
Yeah.
Like I've got this one here,
the little
which was about, well, this is like a decent A4 size. It was like 40, 45.
Yeah, so it's amazing how the technology's come down. So I'd strongly recommend not only Grease Pencil, but also things like sculpting as well benefit really well from having a tablet like that. It's not necessary, but it certainly helps. There's a Paul, what's the tool called where you can use your mouse and it delays the stroke so you can draw it smoothly? You know the one I'm talking about?
Inside of Grease Pencil?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just a setting. Hang on a second. Let me open up Blender.
So there's
here.
a setting in Blender where you can. It makes it much easier to draw with a mouse. So being able to do some concept art in Blender and being able to do it in 3D as well. If you've got an idea of what a model looks like from the top and side, you can actually sketch it, move around your model, and sketch on a different plane, and you've pretty much started to outline your model, which is really, really cool.
Oh yeah. Oh, you must be talking about the stabilized stroke. Yeah, that kind of gives you a bit of a it's a really cool tool. I mean, a lot of programs have this, and they work in various ways. Often it's an interpolation trick. So if you're coming from, say, Clip Studio Pro or Clip Studio Paint, that's what it's. I keep calling it Clip Studio. Everything has got Pro on the end.
Right.
That even Photoshop, of course, it sort of like interpolates your stroke. So if you've got a really jittery line, you see it and then it just like snaps into place. This has got sort of like a lead-in function, so you can sort of see where you're drawing and see where it's going to correct. Even once you've drawn it, you just go into edit mode or even a sculpt mode. So if you've ever sculpted in Blender, you can sculpt Grease Pencil lines, which is very, very cool. And that just gives you an added layer of what's the word? Capability or no? You manage to neaten up your lines even on the fly, which is really, really cool.
Well, it's great as well if you've got an area that's slightly too small, you can go and just inflate that one area, and you can do it incredibly precisely because you're just moving around vertices essentially like you would in a 3D sculpt. one of the things I really love about being able to use the grease pencil in Blender is making notes as well,
Mm.
and being able to make them in the 3D space. So you can actually like jot a little hidden message on a 3D model somewhere. Definitely.
Well, we
Yeah.
did that when we were working on Mag Racer,
Yeah.
and we were trying to get the shapes right, and you started sketching. It was like, what is this magic?
Yeah.
How do I do this? And then I didn't know how to get rid of the annotations, so I was just stuck with them.
I can't say because I've not dived into grease pencil and it's not all internalized up here yet. But you know how powerful Blender's modifier stack can be. The fact that you can use some of that stack as well within the grease pencil is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Grease Pencil's got its own modifier stack. Like, you don't actually apply the modifiers for 3D objects. Grease Pencil's got its own, which is very specific to Grease Pencil objects and allows you to do certain things that make sense for a 2D asset. And it even has effects that go along with this. Some of my favorites are just like even just a simple wave effect or even a drop shadow, that sort of thing. They can be incredibly powerful. Even after you just like set them up, then just sort of wrangling them, you can get some really interesting looks.
I think one of the other really powerful things is the ability to take your grease pencil curves, essentially change them into real curves if you want to. Then you've got all the curve modifier abilities or all the curve tools available to you, and on top of that you can convert that to a mesh as well.
Mhm.
So you've got this, and at all stages you can preserve your copy, so you're never actively destroying your data, but you can then do all of the wonderful things that you would do in the 3D world with all those tools. It's just all accessible to you, and that's one of the other things. Going back to Yann's question earlier, why would you use another tool other than Blender? Well, because it's all in one place. Sure, in Inkscape or Illustrator, you can export as an SVG, import into Blender, and work through that workflow. That's absolutely fine. If you already know those tools, that's great. If you're in Blender already and you need to do something, it's much easier to just switch editor mode, start doing the thing you need, and bring it back in. And it's really helpful. I alluded to earlier things like cables. Yes, you can set up curves for that, but perhaps you want the cable to do something a bit funky, and with the grease pencil you can actually sketch and it stick to geometry.
Yeah.
And that can be really, really useful.
I found that I tried to structure the course in such a way that I was coming at it from the point of view that maybe you've used 2D applications before, and jumping to 3D space straight away can be a little daunting. And I'm bringing this back to when you said drawing cables and such. Yeah, you can draw it from the point of view, but there's what's it called? You can change your stroke placement and drawing plane so that you can, say, draw along a imaginary floor. And so you could even draw cables towards the camera or away from the camera. It's very intuitive. It's almost like drawing the model out. And that is something that is fantastic. Once you get your head around working in 3D space, you become accustomed to it, and you work out your own sort of workflows to accommodate that.
Yeah.
I'm quite interested in the ability to start from a concept sketch. Like you make the thing in grease pencil, convert it to Bezier curves, convert that to mesh, and then you can start building it, as opposed to having to start with a prim or make yourself a circle, or not circle, sphere, and then subdivide it and then sculpt it, which is fun, but I'm not good at it.
That's one of the great things. Knowing that Blender is accessible from all of these different angles really does open up the software. And Grease Pencil is a relatively new part of Blender. It's been around in some form for a long time, as you say, with annotation and things like that. That's just writing over your models. But it's just become more and more powerful. What are some of the latest sort of features that have come out recently, Paul, that you're really sort of like you've hooked onto that are actually useful additions rather than like one of those, oh, that's a nice thing to have in that one project that I'm never going to do?
One that when I saw that this was in, say, like an alpha release and then a beta release, but now it's definitely in the main branch. Definitely the vertex coloring changed everything for me, because all of a sudden you've got a color palette to work from. And anyone who's worked in a 2D environment, your color palette is basically where that's where you get all your skin tones, hair colors, everything that you're going to be using. And up until that point, you were creating material after material after material, just like you would for a 3D model, which made sense from a Blender perspective, but not so much from a 2D perspective. Vertex coloring certainly accommodated this wonderful middle ground where, yes, you still have to create a material, but instead of having 100 different types of material to color with this or color with that, you can just have a solid material and a stroke style material. And then using your color palette, you can use the same material, as it were, but color it differently. What I love about it is that you can also create your own custom palettes. And not only just by using a color picker, you can go online and create, say, like a color palette that way, export it as an SVG or a PNG or something like that.
Nice.
You open that up in your image editor, color pick from that, or even generate a palette from an image, and it slots into your Vertex Paint tool as its own color palette. I thought that was extremely powerful, an absolute game changer for me. That's probably the one that is my go-to. There's a couple of things coming up in a future release, but I don't know if we should really go into that just yet, because it's not really covered in the course.
Well, you can mention that these are future things that we're not coursing, but
Okay,
not coursing.
yeah. There's a modifier that I had to play around with a little while ago called line art. And anyone in Blender who's tried to do sort of NPR stuff is probably familiar with freestyle, or even the classic inverted hull method, where you basically have to use a solidify modifier and it inverts the normals, so that when you're looking at the model, it does this sort of faux line work over your artwork. It's fairly convincing, but it's a 3D asset. This line art modifier that's coming out in, I think it's in the next release. You can take a scene, an object, or even a collection of objects, and you add a grease pencil object, you apply the line art modifier, and it basically traces your scene. Not only does it trace it, but it does it in 3D space. It also dynamically updates it depending on your camera. So if you've got an animation and your camera is moving through the scene, it will constantly update that stroke per frame. And so you can get, good parallax or, line depth if you've got sort of other subsequent modifiers that kind of use the camera data to thin out or thicken up the lines. It will do this frame by frame. But of course, because it's grease pencil, you can then just go into any frame and edit those strokes on the fly. And this is a more complex, advanced technique, but it's there at almost a click of a button. And that is very, very powerful as well, because it really mixes that 3D and 2D together.
I saw some examples of that a few weeks back. I think I think it was on Blender Today. They were announcing it, and it looked phenomenal. Rest in peace, comic book creators. I was just looking at it, going, well, obviously, it's just another tool to create that style of art as well. But I was just like, wow, this opens the door to so many people to be able to do that type, that style, that type of illustration, essentially.
And it's also for people who can already do it. It's nice to do it without so many workarounds.
Yeah.
Because you mess up any one of those steps when you're in a rush and the whole thing just falls apart.
Yeah. From an illustration standpoint, I see it as a starting point. It sort of takes me back to why I kind of got into Blender in the first place, and that was just to see if I can use 3D to create my own bespoke references for 2D stuff. And now you've got this tool where, you can quickly model stuff, and then you want to turn that into an illustration. bang, line art modifier, and then you can get into your grease pencil tools, do your coloring, do your tinting, do whatever, and then just have a really cool looking, 3D looking illustration. But you've done that in a 2D environment. Oh no, you've done it in a 3D environment, but it's got the look of a 2D thing.
It's going to get very Inception in a minute.
It's all it's all melding now.
But it's always great when a tool just effortlessly helps you create what's in your head. Like, you're still having to put the work in. It's still your vision. It's not like here's a magic button that creates an image and I'm a genius. But it doesn't get in the way. Whereas a lot of the time when you're trying to do these effects, especially if it's a tool you're not familiar with, you haven't bought the course, or it's not quite fit for what you're trying to do, you can still do it, but it's a lot more work.
Yep, that's correct. And there are some amazing artists doing amazing things in grease pencil, which just take it to another level. I've seen some people do really cool comic style art, but it's almost like a one of those magic boxes where each frame kind of masks out other stuff. And so you're looking at a comic panel, but as soon as you turn that object, you can look into the comic panel. I've seen that sort of stuff. Other people are using it in conjunction with the sculpt tool. And so they're better sculptors. They will sculpt a character just to get that lighting right. And then using the grease pencil with, setting the drawing plane to a specific setting, they can trace over it and get that sketchy line work in. And this is all in. And so they can continue to turn that model and continue to concept. But it's got kind of that shading of the 3D object underneath, which looks fantastic. I mean, the option and the scope of how to use this tool, even in conjunction with existing tools, is amazing.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out why I haven't received the email yet. So I'm going to give that a little while. If that doesn't work, I'm going to send it again. I'm also very intrigued in what you're saying with the way you can use a color palette, because I've spent the last week trying to work to a very specific color palette for a game I'm prototyping. And it's such a pain. Like, first off, I have to trick the engine into remembering all these colors. And then I have to hope it doesn't forget any. And then every time I make anything or move anything or tweak anything, I have to go back in here. No, these are the colors I want. So just having it, here they are, they're ready to go. You can just work from them.
Yeah.
Is invaluable. Yeah.
Look, I like that it gives you options on how to create the color palette. So if you're like me, and here's a dirty little secret, I'm not great with color theory. I'm better with value levels and trying to get the contrast right. I've sort of I approach my art from that point of view, and then colors sort of like icing on the cake for me. I like to use, say, a color palette generator. But then I can import that color palette directly into Grease Pencil, and it's pretty much there, so that I can get my let's see. In my mind, it's always goes back to things like painting Warhammer figurines or that sort of stuff, or creating your characters for games. You know how you got a major color and a minor color?
Yeah.
You can go, okay, here are my major colors and the tones and values that go with that. And here are my minor colors. And you can separate that out on your palette. And then you're just painting with those color palettes. And, as a concept tool, it can be done on the fly, which is really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the great things about the palette, and it was great that you mentioned that, because we've been working on not so top secret project, but we've been playing about in
We've been putting videos everywhere.
But yeah, Yann's got some textures that are just, the hue is just wrong for like grass assets or vegetation. So I've got them in. I'm using Affinity Photo at the moment, which is an absolutely brilliant tool. And I'm tweaking all the values, just trying to get the grass that's underneath all the vegetation just the right thing. But the moment that Yann went in and changed it from just the bog standard colors that were there, and then said, "Oh, Mike, what do you think?" And I was just like, bam, it looks cohesive. It looks like all
Unifying,
the things are supposed to be together.
whether it's an image or a 3D world or whatever it is, unifying the color scheme into one coherent language. I mean, in this case, it's quite a big palette. There's 24 colors in it, right? But just every choice suddenly becomes deliberate. Everything becomes a style. Whereas if you're using whatever colors happen to be there, it can feel more realistic. But if you're going for realism, that's a really high bar. Like the slightest hue difference in these trees is going to make a difference. So being able to work within a color palette is really helpful. It did mean I had these lovely grass and dirt and rock textures and the terrain generated, and they look really, they're quite impressive and almost realistic. I mean, little stars, but almost realistic. And then we put in these very stylized, low poly plants. It's like it looks like someone's dropped a bunch of Legos on my lawn. Like now we have to go in and change all the colors for everything.
In hindsight, it might have been easier to change the material on the on the objects than trying to change the hue of a texture. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's. Do you want to show a bit of that, and then we'll loop back round to?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me bring up the.
Because then Paul gets to see the abstractness of our conversation. Because
I'll open up this monitor
and tell you how you're doing it wrong. Great.
Yeah,
that's
please.
the one. Whilst we got
you, this is very early prototype. Oh, I've changed the name. No wonder I can't find it. It's very early prototype, so it's all.
I mean, it's amazing what Yann's been able to put together.
Let me just preface this. I'm playing with a bunch of plugins other people have made that I've not used yet and seeing what I can make. I did not code everything we're about to see from scratch. Like I've done some work I'm proud of here.
Whilst you're getting that on, I mean, in terms of add-ons, which is plugins, add-ons, whatever it happens to be, are there any that you would particularly recommend for grease pencil work? Are there any particular add-ons, like for instance for hard surface work in Blender? It's often hard ops and box cutter. Those two kind of come in, and for texture work there's other ones. I forget them.
Yeah. I'm not aware of a lot of them because, and I'll say that I'm sure that there's a lot out there that people are developing and so on, and there's only really one that automatically comes with Blender already, and in the course I show people how to enable that. But Grease Pencil is already very feature rich, and so in terms of add-ons, I don't think the tool is there yet. To sort of like have a lot of add-ons that enhance it further than its capabilities. Its capabilities are fairly vast, and so like right now I don't think I can answer that question exactly.
No, that's fine.
Is my stream working, by the way?
Yes.
Great.
So we've got this lovely 3D world, and what would you say it was is it called Scatter, the add-on that sort of sparked?
We have a few add-ons going on here. One is Scatter, and what Scatter does is it'll take a single object and you give it some rules. It works on procedural nodes, and you say, for instance, in this one, I've drawn a curve. I want you to distribute them randomly with this curve. You may rotate them on this axis randomly between 0 and 360 degrees. You may not rotate these two. You can change the scale by this much. You can change the transform, the position with this much. Also, I want these other models in there. And because it's using one model and rendering it multiple times, it's using a multi-mesh. It's much more efficient than trying to render them many, many times. But sometimes you want collision, like these are just meshes. So these trees are also scattered using a different rule set, as are these fences. With these fences, I've drawn a line and given it the rules, and this is one fence.
Right.
So there's a lot of things going on here. We've also put in these God rays, which do change quite a lot. Putting everything within the same palette, though, really has... I mean, even the sky and the light from the sun or the moon are all part of the same palette. Like, I can't keep that in the game. That feels good.
Daytime.
But I'm really proud of those. Once we've got this palette, it's like, well, let's put this in a different environment. So if I head down here... Yeah, don't miss the stairs. You need those.
Whilst Yann's going down those stairs, it's amazing the tool sets that are so familiar to me in Blender are available in Godot as well, and obviously other game engines. But things like that fence, you might use an array modifier following a curve for a certain length of time.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So here we're using the same techniques, right? So we've got the same palette. I've got the fog and a deep purple, so when there's bright light on it, it doesn't really show. I've got the god rays coming from that nice cyan, but it's all a unified color theory. The flames are all unified, and then these. I'm still a bit proud of this bit. Sorry, I want to show off this bit again. Woo! Okay, it's enough of that. I was so proud of myself. These little blinky skulls.
We've got a question coming in. How is scattering different than instancing the same mesh?
It's exactly the same, but the rules behind how those are done are procedural. So rather than me having to sit there for 20 minutes and write a piece of code that says, here's your multi-mesh array, here's the rules I want you to do, I can drag and drop modules in, change the parameters, and says, oh, you want this distributed along a collision, place on floor, and you want to do these things in this order. Fine, I can do that for you. Here's my little skull. This really appeals to the aging goth in me. Lots of skulls in the darkness, but the one that I'm redonkulously proud of is the exit.
Looks absolutely terrifying.
Like, it's such a low poly crappy asset. You put the right lighting and effects on it, and suddenly it's like, oh, that's actually really eerie.
That's totally when I first started when Eevee first came around. It was amazing what you could do because it brought Blender close to what a game engine would do in terms of being able to update and see things in real time. And actually just being able to do a very simple shape with such dramatic lighting or volumetrics, fake as they are, you end up with some.
So the plugins we're using for this, we're using the God Rays, we're using water. So the rivers and waterway system, which includes flow and buoyancy and a whole bunch of other things. We're using height map terrain. And we're using this 3D camera thing, which is quite nice. But I'm also quite happy with the assets we've been making. Because we've been talking about making asset packs. All of these walls, I mean, you'll probably recognize these walls. That's quite clearly, the wall factory. All these walls, floors, all these little things we've just put together for this project as part of an asset pack because it's you want this stylistically to be working with this world.
Yeah.
It's also something about putting it in Blender and then making it a real thing that actually interacts with the environment that just feels good. Like these skulls are so really bad, but you put them in with the lighting and they just work. Plus I can play football with my skulls.
What did you call it earlier?
Skull ball kickabout.
Yeah.
Yep. Next game confirmed. So that's kind of where we are with this thing right now. It's very experimental, but what's really made this come together is a unified palette. It feels intentional. This all feels like a game that is polished and designed, as opposed to me just messing around saying, what happens if I add in some fire to that wall skull? Gonna shop a share now.
That's okay. I'll close it down so everybody can see.
Otherwise, I can't see the thing.
Beautiful faces.
Yeah, I noticed some of the assets, such as like flames, right? I could totally see, creating a looping animation in grease pencil in a matter of minutes and exporting a looping sequence that you can then drop in. Now, I must admit, I've got a blind spot when it comes to game software, but I kind of understand the concept of creating an asset and then just dropping it into a game so that you can use it over and over and over again. Things like flames, things like grass. Yeah, I could totally see the advantage of creating little 2D assets, because they're...
Yeah, in a world like this, which feels very drawn, right? The color palette is very cartoony. You really want the assets to match. Like the grass we've got is good. It's made by someone else for a different kind of game, but it's just too spiky and it's too small, right? We want something like big and flowing and colorful. To answer Monkey Chop's question, what's the performance difference? Multi-mesh instancing is very, very performant. Bastian has done some tests where he's rendered something like 500,000 asteroids on the screen.
Yeah.
And because they're one asteroid and you don't have to work collision, the maths involved is you've done it once,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if you're having to instance multiple meshes, there's going to be a point where your graphics card is just going to give up and go to the pub.
Well, one of the things that I've learned from working in both the Blender space and the game development space is the crossover of the things that you learn, optimizations that game engines have to do, can be employed in Blender as well. So you can this mesh instancing that actually saves you a ton of RAM.
Yeah.
If you've got a particle system and you're using instances of meshes, it's far less likely to fill up your GPU's memory if you wanted to use that for rendering than it would if you just had individual objects all the time and you were doing a rigid body simulation on them. So,
and it really helps when you've got that kind of crossover, because I mean, like Paul was saying, with those torches are using, someone made a sprite sheet of basic smoke particles. So what they've done is they've done noise and they've moved a few pixels each time, and it's fine, right? It's a solid demo. But if you want that to look more stylized, having somebody who can use grease pencil to quickly throw up something in that style with that palette that just works makes such a big difference. And there's all kinds of stuff I'd love to do with that. I mean, that game is crying out for a magic system. I mean, it is, right? All those little skulls really want little shader trails. So when their eyes move, they leave little trails behind them. Which is doable. It's a little outside of my house of wheels. I don't know what a wheelhouse is. But it's something that we can pick up. But it's interesting picking up this kind of game and then focusing on the visuals. Really makes you want to make it artsy. Like, I want to put little hanging banners here and there in the right colors, maybe a bit threadbare, make them soft body so they move when you touch them. But now I've got to put a design on them, and I don't want to do heraldry. Like, I'm not a graphic illustrator. I don't know how to make a banner look pretty. So that's a whole thing.
So we've got Daz. He's joined us. He's got some suggestions about the same way Zelda used to do flames. Yes, very much so. I mean, some of the techniques of the old consoles, the optimizations they had to do. I mean, there was no two ways about it. But yeah, I mean, you can still employ them today as optimizations or even a stylistic choice.
I mean, my favorite is still the original Prince of Persia from way back when.
Or the bit shifting.
Well, the guy designed this thing and he didn't want any enemies. He doesn't want any enemies. Just puzzles. Don't want any enemies. And everyone's telling him, you need an adversary. Like, this game needs an enemy. It's such a sinister world. You need someone trying to make... He's like, I don't want one. And eventually he's like, okay, I need one. And he has 3K of RAM left. So he takes the original NPC, the original PC, and he bit shifts the graphics. And it inverts them. So now you've got a shadow you as your enemy, and that's just brilliant. I mean, that's a great way of saving some RAM.
I also got a question: has the pencil got some frame tweening too? So if you're, I presume, for animation, so moving from one state to another.
I believe it does. Yeah, like it does have a fairly feature-rich animation system. So yeah, it will automatic. It can do some tweening. I'm just trying to sort of think, because I come from an illustration background, but I'm very, very much aware of the onion skidding capabilities and all that sort of stuff. Yes, if you do this thing called what's the name escapes me. It's a tool that you set, and so you can sort of, like, if you draw on one frame, that frame is continued on the next keyframe. And if you say go 10 frames in the future and tweak it there, it should do an in-between for you. Yeah.
Yep, you've always got to be careful when doing animations where you don't actually want the object to move linearly between 2 points, because obviously if you had a jump scene and you had your character here, character at the top, character at the bottom, all they would do is that in a straight line, whereas you might want it going in an arc. Now, I'm not sure, and I'm not putting you on the spot here, Paul, so don't worry if I'm asking a question that you've not played with. But in Blender, normally when you're animating, you can obviously do your keyframing, and then you can do your you can go into the graph editor and change the rate of change on different axes. I presume just because they're vertices, you can do a very similar thing in the grease pencil when it comes to animation.
Yeah. Grease Pencil can lean on the dope sheet, the graph editor, all that sort of stuff. It's also got the added advantage of that if you have multiple layers, because Grease Pencil works on a layer system as well. So you can have layers for fills, you can have layers for your strokes, or layers for individual items in the effects. Oh, here's Chris. Hi, Chris. How you doing? Where was I? Yes. You can even keyframe individual stuff on individual layers. Some of the more exciting animation stuff is with effects. You can even keyframe effects. So let's say you've got this sort of wavy effect, say for a flame. You can just add that, and that will just generate a wave, and you can just sort of keyframe the states of that wave. And so simple stuff like that can be in between without too much fuss. Yeah.
That's awesome. I haven't been through Paul's course 100% yet, but I've gone through the first few, I say first few hours. I've been through about 2.5 hours worth, and it's absolutely, it's opened my eyes actually having someone who uses the tool day in, day out. And I've been aware of it. It's just been sat there, and it's now part of my repertoire, being able to use it within Blender. And I feel like I can use it properly and not just picking it up and not really doing the best justice towards the tool and giving it the ability to I don't know, but yeah, I'm just blown away by how much you can do with the grease pencil now.
Yeah, it is pretty powerful. Yeah, and I think I chose a project which it looks like it could take a lot of time, but I've sort of specifically designed this project to show people how quickly they can generate good-looking material with the grease pencil. There's a part of the project where you create a bubble. Okay, sounds like a very simple thing, but you then take that bubble and you make a custom brush out of it, and so now you are painting bubbles everywhere. And not only are you painting these bubbles everywhere, then you can move them in 3D space. So you can have bubbles in the background, bubbles in the foreground, so on and so forth. Then you can add some effects to those bubbles so that they can be wobbly in other areas. And then, because Grease Pencil does have some limited integration with the 3D assets such as lighting, you can even use point light sources to subtly alter the shading of 3D of Grease Pencil objects as well. And I find it a really cool cheat whenever you do like a comic style airbrushing effect. Instead of trying to wrangle a color ramp or a gradient, I just get a point light and I just move that near there. Now I can just sort of dynamically adjust where it's going to be brighter, where it's going to be more shady. And because you can, by layer, switch on whether or not it interacts with in-scene lighting, you can get some really nice mixes of effects.
I imagine. I didn't realize you could actually do point lighting in Grease Pencil.
Yeah. One thing that it comes with one caveat, and that is that Grease Pencil objects don't as yet cast shadows, which is a bit of a pain because the early demos, when they said, "Oh yes, Grease Pencil now interacts with 3D lighting," they actually have them casting shadows, but that's something that you kind of have to simulate either with Grease Pencil or a drop shadow modifier with a heck of a lot of tweaking. And so that's the one caveat, but I think it's coming up in a future release.
That's the case with most things with Blender. It's moving at such a pace. It's something that's missing right now probably won't be in a few months' time.
Yeah.
And they've had a big influx of support from Epic, from lots of game studios. So it's wonderful to see Blender getting a lot of love from industry giants.
Yep. I'm aware that we have to be cognizant of Paul's time. So we have about 6 minutes. So if folks have questions, concerns, thoughts, and thingamies, otherwise, if you want, we can play the video again because I know some people came in late and I'm going to do stuff with my hands.
Well, actually, whilst people are thinking about their questions, we can actually put that video on to show people who have been late joining us.
Hey everybody, Paul here with some very exciting news. I have just released a new course all about illustrating using the grease pencil in Blender. The grease pencil is a powerful tool which allows you to illustrate and animate 2D artwork directly inside of the Blender interface. If you've illustrated in traditional applications such as Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint, or even if you've never picked up a pencil before and wanted to start with digital illustration, this course will teach you everything you need to know to get you up and running with the grease pencil in next to no time. My name is Paul and I will be your instructor throughout this course. We'll cover everything from navigating the interface, learning about brushes, layers, materials, and more. In just a few hours, you'll learn simple and powerful methods of creating, manipulating, and polishing stunning content, taking full advantage of working in a 3D environment. After mastering the basics, I'll take you through a short series of fun projects. You'll learn how to create your own custom texture brush and set up this simple underwater background. When you're ready to try something more challenging, I'll take you through the steps of illustrating this gorgeous mermaid. You'll put your newly acquired skills to use and learn some of the basics of illustration along the way. Once completed, I'll show you how to put all the elements together, add some effects, and even leverage the compositor to render out a polished illustration. It really is amazing to see what you can achieve using Blender's grease pencil. All of the working files are included, so if you get stuck or just want to focus on a specific area of the project, you'll be able to pick things up from any lesson. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you'll be making using Blender's grease pencil. Thanks to Michael Bridges for bringing me on board to create this course for Canopy Games. If you're interested in signing up, finding out how much the course is, all the relevant links are in the notes below this video. And so I hope to see you there. Bye for now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Isn't that cool? I love it.
It's cool.
When Paul showed me that, I just watched it like 5 or 6 times. I wasn't even critiquing it at that point. I was like, this is so cool.
Oh, good. You got the beginning of my turn up for what dance? Excellent.
Yes.
That was well timed.
Excellent.
So, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, interpretive dances, and jingles. And Paul, if you have any bits you want to add about the course, this is a good time to do it.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me think. Well, I suppose, like, just to kick things off, people might want to know about the structure, which they obviously can see when they, sign up for the course. I deliberately did it in 2 parts. We were going backwards and forwards, Michael and I. Do we just make it a project-based, or and sort of do the tools as we go along the project? And I quickly discovered that I always wanted to go back and say, oh, and you can do this other thing. And so I decided to just start with the very basics. Here's where you find your brushes. This is the tool set where you can draw shapes and lines and blah, blah, blah. Here's a color palette, vertex paint. And just very quickly, in the first, I think it's hour and a half, 2 hours, it just covers all the basics. And even though it comes from an illustrating perspective, this doesn't really touch on animation. I think I've got to stress that to people who are expecting that they're going to be animating. This is illustrating with the grease pencil. It still gives you all of the an overview of all of the tools that you can use. I mean, I touch on keyframing and things like that, but then you sort of have to run with it if you want to animate. Then I go into the project, and the project is basically, let's create something simple, like a bubble. Then let's turn that bubble into a brush. And then let's create a background that looks fairly sophisticated, but we're just leaning on the tools that we've already learned, creating holdout materials or masking, adding gradient materials to existing assets, separating things by layers, even leveraging off that 3D space so we can get a nice sort of like, when you're underwater, is it called a canopy? That sort of caustic effect that you see above when you're underwater? That sort of thing.
I think you should use Canopy in all examples. So,
Yes.
Okay. Sneaky kind of product placement. I like it. What was I going to? Yes, and then of course the last project is illustrating that mermaid, and so then I crack out the Wacom tablet and start drawing with that, and even got a couple of optional extra videos on there that says, okay, look, you don't need the flashiest Wacom tablet. I sort of Google a few and say, look, you can spend pocket change on a cheap one, whatever gives you some pressure sensitivity, and you'll be able to create with it. And then I go through a more in-depth look at illustrating using a more traditional process, getting your sketch down, refining your pencils, your inks, colors, shading, and so on. And then I wrap it all up with bringing it back into Blender by leaning on the compositor a little bit to add just a couple of effects that aren't too complicated. And even if you haven't used the compositor before, you can just say, I just show people, here's what you see, add this node, plug it in here, and bang. So it's nothing too sophisticated from that point of view. But the whole idea is that you end up with something that looks pretty cool. You've created it completely in grease pencil. And like if you wanted to create a further portfolio piece for yourself, you can leverage off all the tools that you've just learned.
And if you're looking to make a very stylized game, because I know a lot of our students do game design, it's not a bad tool.
Oh, yes.
Everything from concept to sprite work to particles.
Yeah. I have a old file that I worked on. It was actually for a webcomic. Should I just share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let me see here. I'm just going to share my Blender screen.
Bit Gamey says, I was going to say that the course seems best suited to illustrations and 2D. Yeah, definitely. We really wanted to focus on the capabilities of the grease pencil on its own merits, not just because it's part of Blender, but what it can do by itself.
Yes. So can you see that screen?
We can.
Okay, so this is just a character turnaround sheet that I worked on. And as you can see, looking through the camera, we're seeing, the front side, even a sort of a, what do you call that? 2.5 posed sketch. And I decided to put, and some basic colors down here. This is before the color palette was actually created. But I'm just going to swing into 3D view to really show you this. I'm just going to middle mouse click and show you where it's living, right? And so you could say take something like that and, say in edit mode, grab a bunch of these vertices, let's say like that. Hang on, let's unlock everything here. There we go. Right. And if you wanted to do a traditional pivot around the medium point, a traditional side view, you could sort of bring that over so that you could got them placed where they live, and then do your modeling on that. I mean, this is a really hack example, but even though this was for a webcomic, just as a turnaround sheet, you can sort of see the capabilities for creating, say, game art, where you want to do a turnaround sheet for your sprites or whatever, or like you said, Yann, a sprite sheet. I would definitely do a sprite sheet using the dope sheet, where you can alter the sprites frame by frame. And instead of doing the destructive draw method known as, where is it? Additive drawing. That's what I was trying to get to. You leave that off, and what happens is that every frame is a clean slate, but you can use the stuff you created in the previous frame. If you put additive drawing on, it will save that frame, duplicate it, and then you can alter it in that frame. So you can very quickly build up a sprite sheet frame by frame, and then export that as a PNG sequence, and you've got all the PNGs ready. And by the way you set up your camera and all that, you can just have exactly the same camera setting, PNG sequence, 12, 24, however many sprites you want. Bang, they're all out there, and you've just done it all in Grease Pencil.
Very nice.
I'm just going to stop.
And it's also quite words. It's also a very efficient way to get a whole bunch of characters done, because once you've got that workflow going, you can then move on to the next character, use the exact same process, and what would have taken you maybe 8 hours will take you 3 or 4.
Yeah. Just seeing one of the comments, I was going to say that the course seems best suited to illustrations in 2D. Yes. I'll just sort of repeat what I said earlier, and that is, even though the course is designed that way, just to give you a taste of the Grease Pencil, it does cover all of the tools. So doing fills, doing effects, using modifiers, they can be absolutely translated to animation as well. It's so that it's not too confusing for people who haven't worked in a 3D space before, so that you sort of like really get comfortable diving into Grease Pencil before you run with it and say, oh, look, here's a character walk sheet and here's how you do frame by frame animation. That's something that builds upon the basic tool set. Yeah,
definitely. Animation itself is a whole topic in itself as well. It's not just, you're not just moving things around. There's loads of theory. The 12 principles of animation is like the starting book. And if I was in my office, I'll be able to pull out a lovely book from Disney, which I'm sure you've probably got on your shelf as well.
I just found out as well that in games, they've moved on from the 12 principles, which is the foundation. And then they've added like 5 concepts that's specific for games, because you can't control the viewpoint in the same way. Like, there are times where you can, like a game with a fixed camera, you can, but in a 3D game, you really have to think about how animation reads. Like, you need that information to be clear from all angles and all distances. It needs to be very clear to the player what is happening. The example they gave was the new Street Fighter game, which is now 3D and you can move around the place. You need to see what that attack is and recognize it from every angle, which is a very different problem from traditional animation.
Definitely, yeah. Especially if you're behind the character, you've really got to know what's going on. Although why you'd move your camera to that angle to try and find someone, I don't know.
Maybe you're shy.
Maybe. Right. Has anybody got any other questions for any of us? I mean, we're all here. We're all able to answer questions. Hopefully, questions for Paul, though.
I mean, sure. Like, how do you pronounce graphics interchange format? The GIF.
No, you pronounce it PNG.
There you go. Which is a better format anyway.
I am strongly in Team GIF, even though my name is full of hard G's. You say it Caggegi, and it's a hard G, but I am strongly in Team GIF when it comes to GIF, because
I am actually Team GIF. Well, it's just a more satisfying. GIF is a cleaning product in the UK. I'm not putting that on my screen. It's going to go wrong.
It's very abrasive. Yes. Have you got a glossy screen and you want it matte?
It used to be lemon juice as well. GIF lemon. I remember that.
Yeah, I think it's called Sif these days, but enough product placement for today.
There you go. How do you pronounce your last name? There's a question for me.
Very well.
Caggegi. That's how you say it.
To be fair, I was talking to my partner about it. I was like, I don't actually know how to pronounce. I'm going to make sure I know before we stream, just in case I introduce you with your full name.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you pronounce it? She asked me, how do you pronounce his name? I went, it's Paul.
That's easy enough.
Yeah. We'll leave it there.
Yeah, if you're interested in seeing what Blender can do with any kind of 2D art, with illustration, whether it's for games or comics, or just you feel like doing some sketching, I do recommend it. It's a good course.
And of course, if you know someone who would be interested in it as well, please spread the word.
Basically, buy it like 9 or 10 times each.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to buy a friend for a copy, if you want
If you
to buy
wanna
a friend for if you want to
Buy a
buy a friend,
friend,
we don't do that. But if you want to buy a copy for a friend, that's absolutely fine.
I think we should quit while we're ahead. What do you think?
Don't leave me behind, guys.
Leave no Yann behind. I'd encourage that.
Oh dear.
All right. Well, it sounds like we should get ready to do the sign off. Have we picked a way of signing off yet?
I usually ruin it. Shall I ruin it this week too?
I think we should. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and congratulations, Paul. It's a really good looking course, and hopefully we'll see lots more stuff from you because it was good stuff.
It was fun to work on. I really hope a lot of students get a lot out of it, and just get a really basic understanding. Well, actually, they're going to get more than a basic understanding, I think, from this. Definitely. I mean, just a few hours with the grease pencil, and I think. I think they'll be ready to they're off to the races.
Full journey tutorials on grease pencil out there. There's some that assume you already know it and here's a technique, and then someone's like, okay, here's how you find it. But like the whole journey from like how do you find it and let's make a cute mermaid. It sounded better in my head.
yeah, and I think I think they're going to be, and on that bombshell, yes, I get that reference.
Nice.
Thank you guys for having me on this live show. It's been a lot of fun. And yes, definitely be around.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Michael, for doing the Michael things.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. See you again next week. Bye.
Press the button.